Welcome to the Kwibuka Podcast, written by Dr. Jean Damascene Bizimana, minister at Minubumwe, and recorded by Josue Ishema. After years of research, he has collected and compiled information on different actions that led to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. This episode is going to shed light on the prison's contribution in the preparation and execution of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Under the regimes of President Kayibanda and President Habyarimana, prisons were used as instruments of torture, where those banned by each of these two regimes were confined in inhumane and barbaric conditions. Habyarimana had used these methods by imprisoning dignitaries of the Kayibanda regime that he overthrew on July 5, 1973. Most dignitaries died from poor detention conditions or were assassinated in prisons in Ruhengeri and Gisenyi or thrown into undiscovered pits. In October 1990, President Habyarimana resumed this kind of repressive method. As shown on the Ministry of Justice list below, on February 4, 1991, the number of people detained on the pretext that they were accomplices of the Inkotanyi amounted to 8,402. These individuals were distributed in prisons as follows: 251 in Butare, 310 in Jumba, 216 in Cyangugu, 29 in Gikongoro, 304 in Gisenyi, 294 in Gitarama, 623 in Kibungo, 57 in Kibuye, 6,120 in Kigali, 41 in Nyanza, and 157 in Ruhengeri. Most of these innocent Tutsi were unjustly arrested and died in prison under the unproven accusation of being RPF accomplices. They fell victim to poor living conditions, torture, and deprivation of medical care. In Butare prison, some Tutsi contracted bacillary dysentery, and some of their fellow detainees who were doctors wanted to treat them. The prison management did not appreciate this and decided to separate the sick from the doctors. They kept the sick in a room called the death hall. As a result, some patients died due to lack of care, like Paul Gakuba, a well-known businessman in Butare who suffered from diabetes. He fell into a coma for 2 days due to the lack of medication. After 4 days, the prison management, who were sure he wouldn't survive, took him to the hospital where he eventually died. Another Butare businessman, Evariste Kamugunga, died at the age of 53 on October 27, 1990. He was also a victim of bacillary dysentery due to lack of medical care. Zephirin Kagiraneza, a teacher at the Butare school group, also died under the same conditions at the age of 35. Two Belgian lawyers, Eric Gillet and André Jadoul, who were able to visit Rwandan prisons from January 9th to 17th and from February 2nd to 5th, 1992, noted in their report that torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading punishments or treatments were practiced in most Rwandan prisons. Tortured detainees were isolated in such a way that International Committee of the Red Cross agents could not visit them either. Many of these detainees succumbed to their injuries. The late François Nsengiyumva, who was detained in Butare prison, wrote a book called Ingoma y'Amaraso, which translates to The Regime of Blood, in which he meticulously recounts the atrocities committed, mentioning the names of people he remembers dying in that place from beatings. For example, he mentions the case of a person who died on October 29, 1990, from blows to the head with rifle butts. Another person, nicknamed Kiragi, who was deaf-mute, succumbed to beatings by prison guards under the pretext that he refused to speak even though he was deaf and mute. His torturers beat him, saying, "Not wanting to speak, these are the tricks of the Tutsi. He pretends to be mute to not reveal Tutsi secrets." We have a report from the so-called security meeting of the Butare Prefectural Council held on November 4, 1990, under the chairmanship of the Secretary General of the Ministry of Interior and Communal Development, Innocent Dindabahizi. The report specifies the instructions and the names of the authorities in Butare who were tasked with carrying out this criminal work. The minutes were drawn up by the rapporteur of this meeting, Commander Cyriac Habyarabatuma, who headed the gendarmerie group in Butare, reproducing the orders of the Secretary General, Innocent Dindabahizi, who came on a mission to Butare to establish a committee tasked with executing the orders for the arrest of the Tutsi. This committee was ordered to combat the spread of false rumors and rumors by the enemy and its accomplices, to detect in time elements engaged in this activity, to assist civilian and military authorities in unmasking the enemy in its multiple hiding places and whatever forms and strategy it resorts to organize self-defense in all communities. Everything must be done for a well-organized awareness and coordination without forgetting open collaboration for better coherence and speed in action. Vigilance and caution must be redoubled because the enemy is likely to carry out sabotage actions everywhere. Information exists indicating that there are movements of Inyenzi towards Butare and that the city of Butare could be the next victim of Inyenzi attacks. The Butare Committee, set up by the Ministry of the Interior to carry out this criminal plan, consisted of Temahagali Justin, prefect who was its chairman by virtue of office, Major Nteziryayo Alphonse, commander of the military district of Butare, Ndayambaje Telesphore, head of immigration and immigration services in Butare, Iyamuremye Fidel, chief intelligence officer for Butare prefecture, Ngirinshuti Vedaste, Deputy of the Chief Intelligence Officer for Butare Prefecture, Warrant Officer Kagango Ephraim, Director of Butare Prison, Kanyabashi Joseph, Mayor of the Urban Commune of Ngoma, Simbarikure Asiel, Deputy Prefect of Busoro Sub-Prefecture, Hakizamungu Jean-Baptiste, Prefecture Sub-Prefect, and finally, Kasana Jean Chrysostome, Prefecture Sub-Prefect. In these minutes, it was specified that the prosecutor of the Republic in Butare, Mr. Theonest Bagirubwiko, had refused to continue participating in the work of this committee, most likely to oppose the interference of the executive power in the judicial system. The other members accused him of releasing people arrested for complicity with the Inyenzi without obtaining the approval of this committee, and thus referred him to his superiors for replacement. In doing so, he was replaced in mid-November 1990 by prosecutor Apollinaire Nsengiyumva from Byumba, where he had notably distinguished himself in the arrests of Tutsi, followed by their ignoble murder at the Byumba military camp. At the very first meeting of the Triage Commission, led by prosecutor Nsengiyumva Apollinaire in Butare on November 29, 1990, he indicated the methods to be applied in the arrests of suspects supposedly complicit with the RPF, including the existence of a table describing in columns the accused totally complicit with the RPF with evidence, the accused with allegations yet to be verified, as well as the accused proposed for release. This Triage Commission, chaired by Prosecutor Nsengiyumva, effectively decided who should be arrested, who should remain in prison, and who should be tortured for forced confessions in all cases arbitrarily. Thus, in this meeting on November 29, 1990 of the Commission, chaired by Prosecutor Nsengiyumva, it was decided to arrest several individuals, including Kagabo Silas, with the sole reproach that while the country was under attack on 1st October 1990, he had sheltered Ugandans, as specified in the minutes. During the Commission, they also decided to proceed with the arrest of another Tutsi named Theodomil Nyungura, who was an inspector of judicial police in Commune Runyinya, for the sole reason that his older brother Kayumba Gaspard, detained in Butare prison, holds equations on ethnicities and other subversive notes. The IPJ in question, states the minutes, holds a grudge against the Hutu. He too is to be arrested by the gendarmerie. The gendarmerie designated a subcommission of triage that decided on the right to life or death of the Tutsi arrested for false accusation of complicity with the Inhotanyi, which was composed of Nsengiyumva Apollinaire, prosecutor of the Republic in Butare and president of the commission. Lieutenant Colonel Marcel Gatsinzi, commander of Butare Gikongoro military district. Commander Habyarabatuma Syriac, commander of the gendarmerie group in Butare. Warrant officer Ephrem Kagango, director of Butare prison. Gasana Jean Chrysostome, sub-prefect in charge of political affairs. And finally, Iyamuremye Fidel, head of the prefectural intelligence service. The commission had 3 investigators who participated in all meetings, namely Matabaro Jean-Baptiste, deputy prosecutor in Butare, Uwihoreye André, also deputy prosecutor in Butare, and Gasirabo Laban, deputy director of Butare prison. The Byumba prison in 1990 was a formidable place for Tutsi detained for the dreadful false accusation of complicity with the RPF. Most of these individuals were arrested in the Murambi commune by Mayor Jean-Baptiste Gatete. Those who were not directly killed by Gatete were violently beaten and transported, dying on the way to the Byumba prison. Before each arrest, a consultation meeting was held, attended by Mayor Gatete, Manasseh Bigwenzare, Mirasano, Mudaheranwa, Mbuguje, and Karemera. These individuals were then accompanied by cell leaders to designate the homes of those to be arrested. The witness, André Gatera, who was detained for 6 months during his arrest, reported that his fellow detainees from Murambi consisted of 12 people, namely Bukekabiri, Burakari, Kaburame, Kagabo, Karyabwite, Mukakinani, Munyeshuri, Ndori, and Sebudandi. This group was not arrested on the same day. Gatera was apprehended by a cell leader named Karemera under the orders of Mayor Jean-Baptiste Gatete and Manasseh Bigwenzare, the president of the Murambi Canton Court. Upon arrival in Byumba, witness Gatera noticed that Sebudandi and Kagabo, who had been arrested before him, had been killed the day before. Upon his arrival, his other companions, including Bukekabiri, Kaburame, and Ndori, were also killed. Before massacring them, their eyes were blindfolded and they were transported to the Byumba military camp. There, they were thrown into a large pit dug for this purpose, where they were burnt alive with tires. Byumba military camp was headed by Major Pierre Ngira from 1983 to 1991. The authorities responsible for leading the detainees to the slaughterhouse were as follows. Judicial Police Inspector Rutobo, currently detained for genocide crimes at Miyove prison. Apollinaire Nsengiyumva, originally from Ruhengeri, who was a prosecutor before being transferred to Butare, and Jean Duguyemo, who was the director of Byumba prison and is currently detained at Musanze prison. In 1993, Major Ngira told the International Human Rights Commission, which investigated the programs committed during this period, that he had received 18 people sent by Mayor Gatete and that they had indeed been killed. Among the other victims of Byumba prison identified by the International Commission in 1993 was Zakari Mugambira, who was a construction entrepreneur who lived in the center of Rukomo, Muvumba commune. He was sent to prison by Mayor Onesphore Rwabukombe, who is currently detained in Germany after being tried and convicted of genocide and sentenced to life imprisonment. There was also Jean Mugambira, son of Kanyabigega, who lived in Rukomo. In Kibungo prison, Tutsis were severely beaten under the orders of local authorities by a cruel prisoner detained for murder and nicknamed Gifaransa. His real name was Emmanuel Uhoraningoga. Gifaransa was originally from the Gishita commune in Kibuye and the son of Alexis Sekabga and Marie Mukambuguje. Gifaransa was notorious for his cruelty in Kibungo as he was a renowned bandit. During the period of arrest of these unfortunate Tutsi, falsely accused of being RPF accomplices, he was the leader of the other prisoners in Kibungo prison. Many detainees succumbed to Gifaransa's beating. Among the notable victims was Professor Charles Kagango, who taught at Zaza Seminary. He was beaten to confess that his younger brother, who was a soldier in the Ugandan army, had visited him before the RPF attack. Kagango denied these allegations. He was then bludgeoned with a pestle and machete and spent the night sobbing. He passed away at dawn. Dr. Bigomwa Pierre Celestin, who was the younger brother of Martin Wichana, founder of the SEDER, and the doctor in Kibungo, falsified Kagango's death certificate by stating that he had died from an asthma attack. The head of the intelligence service in Kibungo, Paul Senhasha, wrote a note to his superiors stating that the late Kagango had a labor training center where he taught people how to use weapons, a state lie. Another Tutsi victim of Gifaransa's beating was Mugambaje, originally from Kabarondo commune. These tortures, committed by Gifaransa under the orders of Kibungo authorities, led some detainees who were considered accomplices to confess to the crime of betraying the country to escape torture. We can mention those who were a part of the team called Karuranga and who confessed under torture that they had learned to handle weapons to welcome the Inkotanyi once they arrived in Rwanda. The list of Tutsi brutally beaten in prison is long. We mention a few names including Claude Nyonshuti, Innocent Zitoni, and Ntaganda, all of whom were traders in Kibungo, Sylvestre Nkusi, who taught at Zaza, Alfred Nkubiri, who was an employee of the company La Rwandaise, Claver Barimwingondo, Charles Katabogama, nicknamed Korwako, Jules Mugabo Kayonga, who taught at Saint Fidel Institute in Gisenyi, Rutajengo Emmanuel, who was beaten for several days to force him to confess his crime, Pastor Jean de Dieu Mumvaneza, also a victim of these tortures, and Pastor Mumvaneza's wife, Dorothée, the owner of a restaurant in Kianzi. She was accused of being the friend of a heavy truck driver who stayed in Tanzania after the RPF attacks. The torturers nailed Mumvaneza's feet to kill him like Jesus, they said. As for his wife, she died from multiple stab wounds inflicted on her. In Kibungo prison, the group of torturers consisted of Prosecutor Bushishi Matias, who killed many people during the genocide, the head of the intelligence service, Paul Senhasha, and substitute Calixte Kanyemera. Finally, there was the prison director, Joseph Byakunda. This list is not exhaustive, and there were also others who tortured the Tutsi to force them to confess that they were RPF accomplices. In Nyanza prison, there were also cases of the torture of Tutsi who were detained in Nyanza prison. Thus, as indicated in the security meeting minutes of the Nyabisindu Subprefecture, held on November 23, 1990, chaired by the subprefect Michel Habumugisha, along with Florian Munyangeyo as rapporteur, 31 people were accused of complicity with the RPF in the town of Nyanza. Their files were to be transmitted to the courts. These individuals joined 230 other Tutsi arrested for the same suspicions and later transferred to Nyanza prison from Kigali. The minutes continue by reporting that in this meeting, participants were informed that the mother of a Tutsi merchant named Kayihura Claver, better known by her alias Milcoline, had refused cell members to search her house. The meeting ordered that the search be conducted by force, and if she continued to resist, it would be necessary to break down the doors of her house. This meeting also addressed the issue of Inkotanyi Club, which was an association of teachers in Nyanza, which existed since 1973, and inquired about whether this appellation was linked to the RPF Inkotanyi. After questioning Mukiga Theogene, who explained that it is a name they randomly chose, the members of the Security Council of the Nyabisindu Subprefecture concluded that the name Club Inkotanyi had nothing to do with the RPF. In the midst of the session, the prefect of Butare Prefecture, Justin Temahagari, arrived from a trip to Kigali and stated, "They must all remain vigilant that the enemy who attacked the country is still among us and that it has dispersed throughout the country." The prefect emphasized that 31 people arrested in Nyanza are not the only ones who intended to seize the town of Nyanza. He asked all those in the meeting to unite to hunt down the enemy and its accomplices without ever tiring until the enemy is completely unmasked. These remarks by Prefect Temahagari clearly constitute a call for systematic hunting of Tutsi, and the emphasis on the small number of 31 people arrested in Nyanza demonstrates that Prefect Temahagari was desensitizing his constituents to redouble efforts for a greater number of arrests. The rest of the minutes prove this quite clearly, as it is written that the prefect asked the sub-prefect of Nyabisindu and all the burgomasters to continue mobilizing the population on this action. He insisted that the gendarmerie should not decrease the intensity of commitment with which it began its interventions, that the barriers should be maintained and controlled, that the searches should continue, but taking care not to brutalize foreigners passing through Rwanda. The prefect continued by reminding that reports of these foreigners go very far and are easily acceptable by the international opinion. Listening to these remarks, one cannot be clearer about a call by a political leader for systematic and widespread denunciation to track down Tutsi within the population. It should be noted that according to the territorial administration of the time, the prefect held all powers within the prefecture he led. Thus, his orders were automatically executed without any other form of trial. Another point raised in this meeting, which proves the extent of hatred towards Tutsi reaching immeasurable levels, is the case of Munyakayanza Fulgence, who was arrested in Rusatira under suspicion of complicity with the RPF. The prison director explained that Munyakayanza was seriously ill and visibly dying while hospitalized at the Nyanza hospital. He also explained that his left lung was rotting, which was likely due to the poor detention conditions. The participants in this so-called security meeting turned a blind eye to this worrying case, concluding that all those who visit Munyakayanza must be registered, subjected to interrogation because among them there may be accomplices of the enemy. This demonstrates extremism and inhumanity at the highest degree that the Tutsi endured during this period. The cases presented here regarding the Nyanza prison are just a few illustrations of a major practice that affected the entire country. At the detention center of the Rwamagana Gendarmerie, a case that exemplified the immense cruelty and inhumanity was the arrest followed by the murder of the Anglican canon Alfred Cyafubire, director of the School of Letters of Gahini, who was killed in a cell in Rwamagana on December 6, 1990. Alfred Cyafubire was a Tutsi pastor within the Episcopal Church of Rwanda, which was led by Bishop Adonia Sebununguri. He was arrested on December 6, 1990, by the mayor of the Kayonza commune, Leopold Senkware, and taken to Rwamagana. The mayor falsely accused Canon Cyafubire of being in cahoots with the RPF and having information about its attacks. The mayor handed Alfred Cyafubire over unharmed to intelligence agents and the gendarmerie at 3 p.m. on the same date. They took him to their office in Rwamagana. They beat him and he died on the spot. His family requested an autopsy, but the authorities opposed it. They even refused to hand over the body to the family. Finally, they agreed to do so on December 7, 1990, following pressure from Amnesty International, who were alerted by his family and friends abroad, mainly British and German missionaries who had worked with him in Gahini. The content of a document dated December 8, 1990, written by the prefect who led the Kibungo prefecture, Laurent Bukibaruta, leaves no doubt about his assassination by the authorities. Indeed, in his confidential letter addressed to the Minister of the Interior and Communal Development, which Prefect Bukibaruta forwarded to the minister as a report from the Prefectural Security Council of the Kibungo Prefecture, which examined 2 points, namely, investigations concerning the suspects arrested in the war triggered by the RPF, and the case of the death of Canon Alfred Cyafubire. On this second point, the prefect writes, regarding the death of Canon Alfred Cyafubire, who was the director of the School of Letters in Gahini, he arrived in Rwamagana in very good health. He died there in the afternoon. What is evident to us is that he was one of the accomplices of the enemy because his name was on the list found in the clothes of an Inyenzi who was killed in Rukara. Here is the content of the remarks made in the introductory letter of the report, which clearly indicates that Cyafubire's death is the state affair. This conviction is confirmed when one reads the detailed content of the minutes drawn up by the prefect Bukibaruta on his death, which are as follows. The gendarmerie commander said that he learned of the death of this individual, but as he arrived in Rwamagana on the same day of December 7, 1990, he did not have time to learn much more. The intelligence agents in Rwamagana, as well as the gendarmerie and the communal authorities of Muhazi, confirmed that they beat Alphonse along with the gendarmes until he died. He added that those who beat him are surprised that he died from these blows, whereas many other people have been beaten like him but did not die. The Prefectural Council of Kibungo endorsed such a despicable act and made no effort to prosecute its perpetrators, even though it was proven that they were state and security agents. Participating in this council were Prefect Laurent Wikibaruta, chairman of the meeting, Ushishi Mathias, prosecutor of the Republic in Kibungo, Major Budura Augustin, commander of the Gendarmerie Group in Kibungo, Lieutenant Dangurura Jean Damascene, Rwandan Army Battalion in Huye, Senhashya Paul, head of the Central Intelligence Service in Kibungo, Sekagina Faustin, sub-prefect of the prefecture, Nambuko Joseph, head of the Intelligence Service of the Rwamagana sub-prefecture, Habimana Jean Damascene, team leader on mission in Muhazi commune, agent of the Central Intelligence Service. In Kibuye prison, Tutsis were tortured by the higher authorities of this prefecture, including Major Rwabakika, who was the commanding officer in Kibuye, Mr. Kabera, the sub-prefect of the prefecture, Juvenal Mihigo, who was the president of the first instance court, prosecutor Anastase Mugemanshuro, Simeon Rwabigwi, head of the intelligence service, and François Mugemankiko, prison director. In Gikongoro prison, similar crimes were committed, led by the prosecutor Cels Semigabo, in addition to other agents under the authority of Prefect Joseph Habiyambere, who was originally from Gisenyi. A unique case was observed in this prison because authorities noted that its director was a Tutsi who had changed ethnicity. His name was Jean Isabane, and he was accused of having relatives and brothers in Masisi and Rutshuru in the Democratic Republic of Congo, thus making him a significant target. In his letter, dated March 25, 1991, Prefect Joseph Habiyambere wrote to the Minister of the Interior with copies to the Minister of Justice and the Director General of the Central Intelligence Service, accusing Isabane of illegally obtaining an identity card with Hutu ethnicity mentioned. The prefect mentioned that the next day he would conduct a deep interrogation against Isabane about his true ethnic identity and how he obtained his identity card with Hutu mention. The prefect also requested that Isabane be dismissed from his position as director of Gikongoro prison. Indeed, the request of Prefect Habiyambere, who had previously served as Director General of the Central Intelligence Service before his appointment to Gikongoro, was followed. The director Isabane was immediately dismissed from his position solely for being Tutsi, and he was killed in the genocide. May his soul rest in peace. Overall, in all prisons in Rwanda, Tutsi and Hutu accused of being RPF accomplices were victims of unspeakable atrocities, often committed by those known as Kapita or prison leaders in collusion with prison directors and certain authorities, particularly those of the Judicial Inspection and Intelligence Services. Other human rights violations, such as deprivation of meals, confinement in dungeons without the right to wash, beatings, and more, were committed under the authority of prison directors. For example, Adjudant Barakengera, who was the director of Kigali prison, was a renowned torturer. Any Tutsi imprisoned there was brutally beaten. The same was true for Adjudant Ephraim Kagango, director of Butare prison. All of these individuals were part of the clique known as the Abachiga, people from the north, a stronghold of the Habyarimana regime. This was in October and November 1990, 3 years before the total extermination of April to July 1994. In 1992, two Belgian jurists, Mr. Eric Gillet and Mr. André Jadoul, were sent by a Belgian association for the defense of human rights, the Committee for the Respect of Human Rights and Democracy in Rwanda. They conducted an investigation in Rwanda from January 9th and from February 2nd to 5th, 1992. The purpose of this investigation was to examine the human rights situation in Rwanda. In their investigation, they collaborated with two Rwandan associations, namely ADL, the Rwandan Association for the Defense of Human Rights and Public Liberties, and Kanyarwanda. In their report, published in May 1992, Mr. Eric Gillet and Mr. André Jadoul indicated that serious injustices are being committed against Tutsi in Rwanda. They report on wrongful dismissals, arbitrary detentions under inhumane conditions, including cases of torture leading to deaths, notably in Butare prison. They also mention large-scale massacres of Tutsi in the prefecture of Gisenyi and Ruhengeri. According to the report, the origin of these pogroms is the capture of the town of Ruhengeri by the army of the RPF in Inkotanyi on the night of January 22, 1991, which liberated those who were detained in Ruhengeri prison. After the capture of this town, authorities compiled lists of Tutsi from various communes. They then deployed soldiers to eliminate them. Most Tutsi were killed, while a few rare survivors managed to flee to Zaire. These massacres were particularly intense in the communes of Mutura in Gisenyi, Kinigi and Mukingo in Ruhengeri. Among the persons killed mentioned in the report is Epimac Samvura, arrested at his home by soldiers from the Mukamira camp. They took him to the Mukingo commune office where he was killed on January 28, 1991. His body was reported missing. The report also mentions persons who were arrested and then killed by the mayor Juvenal Kajeligeri. Mr. Gillet and Mr. Jadul provide other examples of Tutsi killed in the communes of Mutara and Gisenyi, including Camille Kalisa, a veterinarian from the Mutura commune and originally from the Nyaruhengeri commune in Butare. He was assassinated on February 5, 1991, by peasants under the orders of soldiers from the Bigogwe camp. The report explains that Tutsi were killed with unspeakable cruelty. It gives the example of Bajahe hanged from a tree branch and dying after 3 days, devoured by birds of prey. An infant named Gishongore was cut in 2 pieces. The report recounts that many Tutsi committed suicide to escape the atrocities when they learned of the barbarities with which their loved ones had been massacred. Mr. Gillet and Mr. Jadul also indicate that they gathered several testimonies from the prisoners held at Gisenyi prison. They confided that the prison management had repeatedly asked them to dig mass graves in the Gisenyi cemetery into which Tutsi were thrown. Most of these individuals had been killed in the premises of the Gisenyi Gendarmerie, as led by Captain Andre Bizimana, where they were tortured during interrogations. May their souls rest in peace. Check out the rest of our podcast and share them with others